Oh, no. Welcome to Community Forum. My name is Michael Hammond, and I will be your host for this episode. Today's guest is John Paul. He's AAA's car doctor and senior manager of public affairs and traffic safety. With more than 40 years of experience in the automotive field, John Paul has earned the title of car doctor. John began his career as an automotive technician and maintains his ASE Master Automotive certification. He is president of the New England Motor Press Association, a member of the Society of Automotive Engineers, chairman of several vocational school automotive advisory boards, and an advisor to the AAA National Automotive Engineering Board. He is a regular automotive columnist for the Boston Globe and the Providence Journal newspapers and websites, and has written thousands of articles for AAA, weekly newspapers, and automotive publications. He is a regular guest on radio and television shows throughout the Northeast and hosts his own weekly radio show on WROL Boston, answering wide-ranging questions from listeners, and runs a podcast about car care. John has evaluated more than 1,000 new cars and was an early adopter of electric vehicles, at one time owning a Renault Electric Leopard. Welcome, John.
And the last part I'm not really proud about, actually, the Renault Electric Leopard, but yeah.
I vaguely remember those. I remember the Renault Alliance.
Yeah. Prior to that, there was something called the Le Car, and a company out in Acton, Massachusetts, converted it to electric power, and it was a horrible car. It was, but it was very early in electric car production, and it was interesting that it was made here locally in Massachusetts, and they made actually quite a few of them, and I had one, and I had it for a while, and it was not practical, but it was kind of fun to own for a little while.
Did it run for about an hour and you had to recharge it?
It would go about 50 miles between charges, which back in those days was actually not too bad.
Right.
And it would charge off regular house current, but it would take pretty much overnight to recharge. And on a flat surface, airport runway, something like that, it would do about 60 miles an hour, but it took a long time to get there. It was really designed to drive around city streets. But it was interesting. It had 16 6-volt like golf cart batteries in it, so it was heavy as can be, and it was kind of a goofy car, but it was interesting. I really wanted to see what made it work, and I did, and sold it to somebody who actually used it for deliveries in downtown Boston.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that.
They figured they were stuck in traffic most of the time. They weren't going to be using any gas, and when you stopped with an electric car, you're not using any electricity either. So it actually worked out for them pretty well, I guess.
Did it work the same way as the hybrids work now, where it's just shut down when you're
stopped? Electric cars, when you come to a stop, other than keeping maybe the radio or the climate control on, there's no power being lost, really. So that's where an electric car will have an advantage sometimes. Being stuck in traffic, they're not diminishing the reserve that much. But now, today's electric cars, we're seeing them go 200, 250, 300, and even in some cases a little bit more than 300 miles between charges. So they become a lot more practical at this point.
Yeah, that's interesting. Whenever I think of Renault, I always think of the color red. It seems like everyone I saw was red.
They had a lot of red cars, and that was by design, because not necessarily red sold that well in Europe, but red at the time was selling really well in the United States. So they painted everything red.
That's interesting. And now they say if you drive a red car, it appears that you're driving faster.
That has always been one of the cases. They've always said that red cars have that, they stand out from traffic. So if there's a whole bunch of people speeding, the police officers sometimes pick the red car because that's the one that stands out. It's just psychological.
That makes sense, actually. So each year, AAA across the country provides road service to 20 million people here in the Northeast, and there are 2 million road service events each year. Is it each year, 2 million?
What happens is across the country we probably do about 20 to 30 million road service events. So, and here in AAA Northeast, which is Massachusetts, Rhode Island, western part of Connecticut, kind of the middle of New York, and part of New Jersey, we probably provide somewhere in the 2 to 2.5 million road service events. So that could be changing a flat tire, jump start, replacing a battery, towing the car, depending on whatever the case is. So you kind of think about that, and you think about the amount of cars that break down. And the good news is that number was probably twice as high 20 years ago. Cars truly have gotten more dependable.
Definitely.
We're seeing less issues with just cars just breaking down. But still, when you look at over the course of a year, if we're servicing 2.5 million cars here in the kind of lower part of the Northeast, that's still a lot of people breaking down.
Yeah.
And they don't all break down. It'd be nice if they all broke down an even amount every day, but they don't. They break down when the weather gets cold. They break down when the weather gets hot. So because of that, we tend to have our peaks and valleys as far as service goes. So yeah.
I count for 5 of those events because I've locked my keys in the car. My battery died from leaving the lights on.
Well, other than, so you've named 2 out of the 3 top reasons we tow people, or we come out and try to help people. The number 1 is usually the car won't start, so a dead battery or something along those lines. The second is some sort of tire issue, flat tire, something along, it could be a blown out tire, whatever the case is. And the third thing is locking your keys in the car. And it's kind of interesting that you think, well, how do people lock their keys in the car? And really all it takes is one additional change in whatever it is you do. So you brought something out to the car with you, you have, everybody seems to carry something with them, but you bring whatever that thing is, maybe your phone, maybe you have a cold and you have a box of tissues with you, and you're gathering them all up to bring them into home or work or whatever the case is, and that one extra thing, that box of tissues, makes you put your car keys down, you get out, you're a good person, you lock your door, you close it, and then at 5 o'clock when it's time to go home, you go, where's my keys? And sure enough, they're sitting on the seat of your car or something. So if people had the same routine all the time, it probably wouldn't happen, but you vary the routine up a little bit, and that's where people get forgetful. So yeah, we do run into that. So
that's exactly what caused my issue.
Okay.
I have a spare key.
Okay.
And I was using my regular keys, and I had the spare key in my pocket, but it was in my jacket pocket. So I put my jacket down on the seat, so both sets of keys got locked in the truck.
Yeah, no, I haven't locked my keys in my car, but I have almost done the same thing leaving the house in the morning. So I usually bring my bag that has my computer in it, and maybe one day I bring my bag and I decide to make a cup of coffee before I leave. And so I take my coffee, I take my bag, close the door, and go, uh-oh.
Yeah,
keys are in the house, the door's locked. Hope my wife's up.
It's usually instantaneous.
Yeah.
You close the door,
uh-oh.
Yep, I know what I just did.
Exactly. So, So.
Okay, so we covered the leading causes of calls to road service. And so what we're going to talk about today is preparing your vehicle for the winter.
It really is, just this past month, October, we called it October's Car Care Month. And we really think about, before the weather gets really, really cold, or before garages get real busy servicing cars that have broken down in the wintertime, between October and November is a good time really to get your car up to where it should be performance-wise, so it's going to work all winter long. And like I said, batteries are one of the #1 reasons we come out to rescue people. And the typical life of a battery in the Northeast is a little bit under 5 years. As we go out and we service cars, we've realized that's about the average age of a battery. Some will fail as early as 2 years, some will last 7 or 8 years, but typically it's in that just under 5-year range. And batteries over time have gotten smaller, but they've also gotten more powerful. What has happened though is they have not become as resilient. So if you're someone who leaves their lights on mistakenly or doesn't close the door all the way, and the dome light stays on until the battery goes dead, or the headlights stay on until the battery goes dead. It used to be some of the older batteries, you would just jump start the car, charge the battery back up, and it'd be good. Now, because of the way batteries are designed a little bit differently, they have more power, more capacity, but every time you kill it, it probably only comes back 90%. So if you're somebody who routinely leaves their lights on and needs a jump start 3 or 4 times over the course of a year, you could have potentially brought that capacity of that battery to about half. And then with the cold weather that comes up, when the temperature gets to be about 30 degrees or so, it takes about 30% more effort for your engine to start. When the temperature drops to freezing, your battery has about half the capacity that it did at 70 degrees. So if your car's a little bit out of tune, if the battery's a little bit old, and batteries are, people don't think of this, but the battery in your car suffers mostly in hot weather.
Oh, okay.
But it stresses in cold weather. So the hot weather is what actually causes the damage. If you go down to Central Florida or Arizona, batteries only last 2 or 3 years because it's the heat that actually hurts the battery. So over a hot summer, your battery may perform okay, and then by the time winter comes, when that capacity drops down, it needs that little bit more effort because the oil's a little thicker and gooier and harder for the car to start. That's when the battery really starts to fail. So again, having a battery that is in good condition is important. It used to be the tools to test a battery gave you an idea what the battery is. Now we have some tools that they're so simple looking that you think they're magic. It's a little tiny box you attach to the battery, and it connects to either a tablet or a cell phone, and you put in some basic information about the battery, what it was when it was new. And even if you don't know that, maybe there's a barcode on the battery, you scan it, and it gives you exactly what that battery should be when it was new. You run this test, which takes literally a minute, and it'll tell you what kind of shape the battery's in. So it gives you a good idea where that battery is. My wife's car is a 2015. Just in the fall, I wanted to test it and see how the battery was doing. And it's still doing fine. It still looks great. But is it getting close to the point where it could need replacing at some point? It could. But you know, as you know, for AAA members and anyone actually should have their battery tested by a good garage. But AAA members, as part of road service, we'll come out and we'll test your battery once a year. We'll clean the battery connections. We'll make sure everything's in good shape for you, and make sure, you know, a lot of times one of the problems that cars don't start in the wintertime is because of dirty battery connections. Well, if we come out and test your battery, when a battery is tested properly, you need to disconnect the cables and test it right on the posts of the battery. And when we do that, we clean everything at the same time. So you end up with good, solid, clean connections when we're done, and you know the battery's in good shape, or it isn't, and then we can recommend a replacement for you too.
Yeah, I'm a AAA member. I didn't realize that was a service that you offered.
Yeah, we have so many different things that we do these days. I lose track sometimes too.
I bet. I'm always discovering new. When I get my newsletter and go through it, there's always something new. I think I need to utilize that. The thing that I do a lot is when I get home, I unwind in my truck, leave the battery running, listen to the radio. And recently, I was doing what I always do, except this time, and I hadn't been listening to the radio for very long, but when I went to start the car back up, it just struggled a little bit more than usual. And I thought, I think I should just at least investigate how old my battery is. So I actually researched how long a battery lasts, and it said exactly what you said, 5 years, possibly 7 if you're lucky. And so it turned out my car I had the original battery from when I bought it in 2012. And it was definitely too old, and it was getting corroded on the terminals. It was definitely time. So I just decided to replace it and just be ready for the winter.
And that's... So if you do that, that's going to be a big help getting you through winter and, you know, getting you here when you need to be here and things like that. The other thing is tires are so important for winter. People think about tires, the traction to get them out of their driveway or parking spot, but also you need that same traction to stop and steer. People don't really think of that so much. They think as long as I get out of my driveway, my tires are in good shape. Maybe not. And we look at tire both composition and tread depth. So if you have to be out sort of before the snowplows are out in the morning, you really should consider a good winter tire. And with winter tires, you really need 4, because there was a time where people would put winter tires just on the back when cars were all rear-wheel drive. And that was okay, but today's cars with anti-lock brakes, and they're mostly front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, if you put the tires that are kind of sticky and grippy in the front and you had a jam on the brakes, well, the car's more likely to want to spin and turn around, so it's important to put 4 matching winter tires on your car. And the other thing is winter tires, we think about winter tires for snow, but winter tires, the rubber composition's a little softer, it's a little bit stickier in cold weather, so even on dry roads, when the temperature is cold, these winter tires will perform better than summer tires or all-season tires. True summer tires that you'll see on a sports car or something like that, they're just awful in the wintertime. They're just absolutely terrible. In fact, years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, when we had, it seemed like one snowstorm after another, I was driving an all-wheel drive Audi, and it had regular tires on it. And I drove it about a half a mile from my house, and I brought it back because it was so dangerous to be on the road because the tires just didn't stick. I drove the same car about a month and a half later when they put winter tires on it. It was a completely different car. It was sticky, it just worked really well. If you don't want to invest in winter tires, and our 2 cars in our family, we have just all-season tires on them. But they're both in good shape. But if your tires are starting to get to the point where the tread isn't deep enough anymore, it's time to think about replacing them. A tire is considered worn out in Massachusetts and most states when the tread depth is down to 2/32 of an inch. That's about the distance between the edge of a penny and Lincoln's head.
Okay.
That's completely worn out. That tire is not going to do you any good whatsoever. If you take a quarter, the distance between the edge of a quarter and the top of Washington's head, I think that's who's on a quarter, that's about 4/32. Really in New England, if your tires are less than 4/32 of tread, it's a good idea to replace them. We did some testing on wet and dry roads, and we took a tire that was not brand new, but relatively new, maybe had 10,000 miles on it, and we stopped from 60 miles an hour on a dry road, and it took, say, 130 feet to stop. A tire with 3/32 took about 140 or so feet to stop. So not that much difference. Then we got the road wet, and that same car with the newer tires on it stopped in about 150 feet. The same car with the tires that were almost worn out was well over 200 feet.
Wow.
So the difference between jamming on the brakes in the distance of a tractor trailer and not, so there's the difference between a crash and one that didn't happen.
Right.
So having tires with good tread is important. As the cold weather comes in, the temperatures change. Every time the temperature changes, you lose a little bit of air in your tires too. The first day we go from a warm day to a cold day, I get all kinds of calls and emails. My low tire light's on. Why? Well, it really has nothing to do with the tires. It really has to do with the temperature outside. And then, you know, if you wanted to look at the scientific facts, you'd have to look at Brady footballs and all of that and say, with the temperature outside and why the football had less air or more air, you could come up with the same conclusion. But the same thing happens with your tires. When the temperature drops 10 degrees, the pressure drops about a pound or two. So if you checked your tires at 50 or 60 degrees and all of a sudden it's 20 degrees out, realistically, you could have lost 10 pounds of air in your tires. When the tires are underinflated, the handling's not as good, the traction's not as good, and the cars won't perform well. So even though it's cold and it's miserable to do it, it's still a good idea to get out there once a month and check the tire tread and check the tire pressure. And the best place to do that, if you don't have an air compressor at home, which a lot of people don't, go to a tire store. Most tire stores belong to a national program. It's called Tire Smart. And they'll go in and they'll air up your tires for free, and they'll look at them and see what kind of shape they're in. And they're not, you know, are they trying to sell you something? Probably. But on the other hand, you're going to get your tires properly inflated, and you'll get an opinion on how the tires look, and that's fine too.
Yeah. My dad got me a Christmas present last year. He was so proud of it. It looks like a power drill. Okay. And it had you could inflate a tire with it.
Okay, yep.
Runs by batteries. Yep. You just pull the button. It's interesting.
It's something that if you keep it fully charged in your trunk. It's in case of an emergency, or you go and you look and your tire's about 3/4 under, 3/4 flat. It's not completely flat.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't want to have to jack up my car and change a flat or call AAA, and I could pull that out and do it. In both of our family cars, we have a little 12-volt air compressor that plugs into the cigarette lighter.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And we have a little jump start pack, so basically you can jump start your own car.
Yep.
And if things go correctly, we'll never use them. That's the
Right.
plan.
Yeah.
But sort of like a good Boy Scout, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And that's what we try to do.
Yeah.
So just in case, because I did have an episode probably 5 years ago. I was out on Route 495, and I was driving along, and all of a sudden the low tire light came on in my car, and it said that the left rear tire was going flat. And I'm like, oh. So I pull over, and sure enough, I got a piece of metal or something in the tire, and it was going flat. And I said, well, I'll just change it myself. That's fine. And I keep a reflective triangle in the car rather than flares. And it's ideal if you have 3, but I only have 1 because they kind of take up a lot of room. So I walked out about 150 feet, dropped the triangle in the highway, by the edge of the highway, walked back. By the time I got back to the back of the car, someone had run it over.
Oh, wow.
Which was better than running me over,
True.
so that was good. But I went to get the spare tire out and dropped it on the ground and noticed it had gone flat as well. So I had a flat tire in the car and a flat spare tire. And then I was like, now I'll call AAA.
Yeah.
And they came out and just aired up the tire. But what had happened is my spare tire sat underneath my car for so long that it actually, and I check it probably once a year. I should probably check it more often, but I checked it probably 6 or 7 months ago, and it was okay. But in the 6 months after that, it lost the seal around the edge of the rim, and it just slowly went flat. And so there's nothing more depressing than having a flat tire and a flat spare, which I had. So I was embarrassed when the tow truck driver came out, because of course I knew him. And he said, what's wrong with you? And I said, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. Yeah. So he aired up my tire, I got on the way and didn't get run over. So it was all good at the end of the day.
Yeah,
So,
you actually just brought up exactly why I would call AAA if I had a flat.
Yeah.
I can change the tire myself.
Yep.
I've done it before, but depending on where I am, especially if I was on a highway, I would definitely call for safety reasons.
For safety reasons, and even with our folks, we'll sometimes send out, depending on what happens, we'll send out 2 trucks. So we'll send out the truck that's going to service your car and a truck to sort of block that vehicle, depending where it is. Just about in a 2-week time frame, 1 tow truck driver across the nation gets killed every year. So, about every 6 days, a tow truck driver gets seriously injured. So, we were one of the real proponents of the slow down, move over law. So, really to tell people, if you see a red light, a blue light, an orange light, somebody working by the side of the road, slow down significantly or move over, give them the room they need to work. Anyone who's ever stood by the edge of the highway and had cars whizzing by them, you can only imagine what happens. And just in the past 6 months, we've had 2 of our own tow truck drivers seriously injured by cars, and one was in a pretty busy non-highway situation, but a pretty busy roadway at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And the other was on the edge of the highway, and they both got seriously injured. They're recovering slowly, but they're recovering. So we really try to remind everybody: slow down, move over, get it as part of muscle memory. So you don't even think of it. You see a police car or an EMS tow truck, we don't even want people to think. We just want them to put their turn signal on, move over to the middle lane, give them room to work. And that way, if something does happen, if they're distracted at night, they're had an extra glass of wine or whatever the case is, it's going to be in their memory to do it. So they're going to just do it without thinking. And that's what we're really trying to encourage people. Get used to doing it all the time.
Yeah, I've seen slow down, move over billboards, and I wouldn't have really thought too much about it or realized how serious of an issue it was, but I have a friend who's a tow truck driver.
Okay.
and lost a coworker, had some close calls himself.
Yeah.
So
Anybody who's ever done that type of work, and the same thing, you see tractor trailers out by the edge of the road, and you see the trucks servicing their flat tires. Same thing. It's a bigger truck, and they still get hit too. So you kind of wonder, how can somebody do that? Most of the time they're distracted or impaired, but if it becomes just a kind of something they do as a routine, it's good. It's a dangerous job out there. We give our drivers every safety piece of equipment we can manage. We're even looking at how we light the trucks now. It used to be brighter was better. We're actually kind of following the same lead as the state police. When you see a state police cruiser now going down the highway, their lights are really bright. When they pull over, the intensity of the lights drops to about half, and the amount it flashes, they blink, actually slow down a significant amount too. So they're not blinding the drivers as much, and it's sort of moth to a flame. If you put too much light out there, people are going to stare at it, and if there's too much light out there, sometimes it doesn't make sense, but it obscures whatever that's there. So sometimes that's done on purpose. In a police situation, they'll light up the area and actually use the light to hide the police officer. So they're, in a bad situation, they're actually hiding behind light, and they can see, but you can't see them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But in a safety situation, you want to bring the intensity down a little bit. You want to limit the light so people can still see you, but not to the point where it blinds drivers. So I always thought it was just simple. You put a revolving light on the roof of the truck and that was it. But it becomes more complicated than that. Even back years ago, they tried just moving, when it was just a single beacon, they tried moving it over to the edge of the vehicle because, well, maybe if it's in the middle, people are kind of aiming towards it. So if we put it by the edge, maybe if it does hit the vehicle, it's going to at least hit the edge of the vehicle. So, but now we're lighting things differently. LEDs let us do a lot of different things. So
I'll be paying attention to that now, because sometimes it is so blinding. I just end up crawling through trying to see what I'm avoiding.
Yeah, so, and that's, that's one of the things. And we recommend that people do carry in the wintertime some reflective triangles or flares or something in case you break down. But people sometimes make the mistake of they put them right by the edge of the car. You don't want them by the edge of the car. You want to put them way away because if people are attracted to them, you want them not near you. You want them away from the vehicle a little bit. So a little winter car emergency kit, a fold-up snow shovel, some extra warm clothes. Too often we go out in the wintertime sort of dressed like this because we're just going from home to work to home.
I'm guilty of that.
But if your car breaks down and you're stuck in your car for any period of time, and you say, well, I know a mile down the road there's a coffee shop, I'm just going to go there. And walking a mile down the road in a foot of snow with loafers on is not a good thing to do. So throw an extra pair of warm boots in the car, an extra warm jacket and gloves, always a good idea. I keep a little fold-up snow shovel in my car just in case something, I pull over to the side of the road, I get stuck, I can shovel my way out. We used to say keep kitty litter or sand in your car in case your wheels get stuck in the snow or ice. Always still a good idea. If you don't do that, sometimes you can take your floor mats out of your car and use those to aid to traction. So, put those on top of the tire, put the kind of the back side of them against the tire, and that sometimes is just enough to give it a little bit of traction so you can get moving, and it works out pretty well. A flashlight, some people say to me, what do I need a flashlight for? My phone's got a flashlight in it. It does, but it's not a great flashlight. So having a good flashlight in the car is a good idea. Have a phone charger with you, because what do we do when we're sitting in the car? Sometimes we're playing with our cell phones, waiting for somebody to show up, and all of a sudden our cell phone goes dead. That's our communications to whoever we need to reach, whether it's you're calling for road service or you're calling a friend, and all of a sudden your phone goes dead and the person goes, well, where are you? I'm trying to call you, and you're not answering your phone. Well, your phone went dead because you don't have any way to charge it up. So, and a lot of times, even though your car battery's dead, there's still enough electricity there that will keep a phone charged up. So it wouldn't be enough to make a car run, but it would be enough to at least keep the phone charged. So again, a few little extra things in the car. One thing that's important, and I talked with older folks about this a lot, is if they need medication, a little quantity of medication kept in the car. So if you have high blood pressure or you have you're diabetic or something, and you're in your car for several hours, and you didn't plan on that, and it's time, if you start to have some sort of reaction, well, at least you have your medication with you, so you can kind of get through to wait for those people. People are old enough to remember the blizzard of '78,
I am.
where people were stuck for days in their car. Not a good place to be if your insulin's at home.
Right.
You know, so again, keep a little quantity of that. So put that sort of winter kit together, extra windshield washer. It seems like I commute about 50 miles each way back and forth to work. It seems like some winter days I go through a gallon of windshield washer. So have an extra bottle of it in the trunk. Not a bad idea.
I'm feeling good about this interview because I have medication in the car. I have an extra bottle of windshield wiper fluid.
Good.
You mentioned batteries and electricity.
Yep.
So hybrid cars, do they ever need a jump?
They do. Most hybrid cars have the big battery that runs the traction motor. And then they have a small battery that runs sort of everything else. So with the exception of, it's either a Hyundai or a Kia, or maybe both, they can actually jump start themselves. So if the 12-volt battery that runs all the accessories goes dead, there's a button that actually takes some power from the traction battery, which may be 400 volts, and converts it to jump start its own battery.
Oh, wow.
But cars like the Prius and other hybrids, they don't have that. They just have the regular battery. So if you left the door open or the car, the radio on for an extended period of time, yeah, that 12-volt battery can go dead, and we do jump start Priuses once in a while.
Yeah.
Not quite as often, but we still do. The battery's not stressed as much, but still, a hybrid car can need a jump start.
Is there anything you can do to prevent a battery from dying?
Be nice to it. Yeah, that's the best thing. It's where I have a coworker, and she's one of the most talented people I know, but she'll sit in her car at lunchtime, and she'll be either listening to a podcast, or she'll be listening to Spotify, and she'll be reading a book, and she'll be sitting there for an hour at lunchtime, and then she'll go to start her car and it won't start because. And you can only do that so many times. So keeping the battery well maintained is important. And if the battery does go dead, and everybody's a little bit guilty of this, they'll say, well, just drive it for a half an hour, it'll be fine afterwards.
Yeah.
That's not really the case. It really needs to be charged up using a battery charger. So if your battery does go completely dead, you should bring it someplace where they can hook it up to a battery charger and let it slowly charge back up, get up to full voltage, and that's going to maintain it. It's when, I'm kind of making the numbers up a little bit, but if a battery, when it's fully charged, is about 14 volts out of a 12-volt battery, and after the jump start, it comes back up to about 12.5 volts. Next time something happens, it's going to maybe drop down a little bit lower, and a little bit lower, and where you normally could sit for half an hour and listen to a football game in your car, all of a sudden now you're only going to sit 15 minutes, and all of a sudden the battery's going to go dead. So that's because it never got that full capacity to start off with, and it started going down and down and down to the point where the car wouldn't start. So a little bit of care can go a long way.
Can a battery fail just from sitting?
Yes. A battery, and in fact, even electric cars can have this problem. Tesla has a cute name for it. They call it vampire drain.
Oh, okay.
So, but all cars today have so many computer systems in them that they're always on. They're always on in the background.
That makes sense.
And even though they start to shut down over time to draw a little less electricity, but you think what happens when you get in your car, your radio presets are where you left them. The clock is still the time it was when you got out. So those things take a little bit of electricity away. The computers in the car have a little bit of memory in them all the time, so they have to be powered up a little bit. So if you drive short distances and the car never really recharges completely, and you let your car sit for a week or so, the ideal situation is somebody who lives a mile from the train station. So they start up their car, they drive a mile to the train station, they shut it off, it sits all day, and then they come back, and maybe some days when it's nice, they don't even, they walk to the train station, so the car sits for a week or 10 days, and the battery's never really had a chance to charge back up. there's a little bit of electricity being vampired away, and all of a sudden you go out one day and the car doesn't start. You go, well, the battery's only 2 years old. Why doesn't the car start? Because that parasitic drain that happens where it draws off a little bit of electricity. And then if there's something wrong, well, then that battery could go dead overnight because the car, maybe there's a pump that doesn't shut off or something that happens. So today's charging systems are very sophisticated. They're really designed to try to keep the battery fully charged without taxing the battery or adding extra load into the electrical system that will take away fuel economy. Because every time the battery charges up, it actually takes a little engine power away, which takes a little bit of fuel economy away. So they try to balance out that perfect match of charging the battery and maximizing fuel economy without overcharging the battery. But yeah, sometimes the battery just sitting, for a couple weeks or 3 weeks. Somebody who goes on a fantastic trip and they're parked at the airport for 4 weeks, and they come back and their battery's dead. Well, their battery's dead because there's so much electrical load on the car, even though the car's shut off.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
I've come back from vacations and it chugs a little bit more
yeah,
than it used to.
And that can happen, and it's never convenient when it happens.
No,
either.
it isn't.
Yeah.
We have some announcements that we need to show right about now, and if Roy could roll those for us, we'll continue on with the.
Hi, this is Roy Cohen. The crew would like to thank Maxie's Delicatessen, located at 117 Sharon Street in Stoughton. You can reach them by calling 781-341-1662. The American Cancer Society is looking for volunteers to drive cancer patients to and from treatments. You can volunteer by calling 1-800-ACS-6662 or online at www.cancer.org. Ilse Mock's Food Pantry and St. Anthony's Free Market is located at 2 Park Avenue in Stoughton. For more information, call Christine Gallagher at 781-341-0611 or 781-341-0549. To get involved with Meals on Wheels, call Jessica at 781-344-8882, extension 2. The Stoughton Penny Saver. Our business is advertising your business in Stoughton. To advertise, call 781-344-4833. Community Forum showtimes here in Stoughton. You can see it on Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays at 6 p.m., Monday at 8 p.m., Tuesday at 5 p.m., either on Comcast Channel 9 or Verizon Channel 28. If you have any comments or suggestions, contact us at communityforum1@yahoo.com. Samaritans, 41 West Street, 4th floor in Boston, Massachusetts, 02111, or call them at 617-536-2460. The 24-hour helplines, 877-870-HOPE or 877-870-4673. Samaritans, 800-252-TEEN or 800-252-8336, or online www.samaritanshope.org. For you bingo players, I want to tell you about the Monday Night Bingo being held at the Ahava Torah Congregation, 1179 Central Street in Stoughton. The doors open at 4:30 p.m. The games start at 6:30 p.m. You come on down and win some money. They have 2 big prizes. One is $1,199 and the other one is up to $3,000. So come on down.
And we are back. I believe Roy has a screen. Okay, we're here with John Paul, the Senior Manager, Public Affairs and Traffic Safety of AAA Northeast, and that's located at 110 Royal Little Drive in Providence, Rhode Island. And John Paul can be reached at jpaul@AAAnortheast.com. And you can also visit AAA.com for any information about AAA. Thank you for tuning in. And now we're going to talk about tires. What can we do to prevent a flat tire from happening in the first place?
Well, don't drive. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, tires will last forever if you don't drive. Tires also have an age. There are some safety advocates who think that after 6 years, tires should be replaced regardless of what the tread looks like. I'm a little bit more flexible than that, but I think if the tires on your car are 10 years old, even though they might look like they're in good shape, what happens is it's more of a matter of the environment hurts the tires. So ozone, the sun bakes the rubber, things like that, and they'll get dry rotted and cracked. And good idea if they're getting a little bit older. Sometimes what happens, people that have 2 or 3 cars in the family, maybe they have a kind of a fun car, they have a convertible or something, and they don't drive it very much, and the car might be 10 or 12 years old and only have 30,000 miles on it. Well, the tires still look good, but do they really look good? If you look at them closely, they're probably starting to crack and break, and those are things that can start to cause a problem. The other thing is inflation. We talked about that earlier, making sure the tires are properly inflated. When the tire is a little bit underinflated, and visually looking at it, you really can't tell. You look at a tire that's underinflated by 5 or 6 pounds, it looks the same as a tire that's properly inflated. But if a tire's underinflated, the sidewall squishes out just a little bit, and that could be enough that if you brush a curb or hit a pothole just right, it's going to damage the side of the tire. Years ago, when tires seemed, people will say to me, well, tires seem more substantial years ago. Not really. They were different profiles, so they weren't as wide. They might have been a little bit taller. Now the tires are wider. The wheels are bigger. It was unusual to see a 16-inch wheel in a car years ago. Now you see 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-inch wheels on regular cars and pickup trucks. Well, what happens is that the tire itself, the sidewalls got narrower. Well, when the sidewalls got narrower, there's less room for the tire to flex. So if you hit a curb just right, you're going to be apt to take a chunk of that tire out. I was driving a Jaguar 2 or 3 years ago, and I hit a pothole about less than a mile from my house, and all of a sudden the car started to shake, so I knew I had damaged the tire. What I didn't realize, in the next 500 feet, the rear tire was going to go flat. So I had 2 flat tires on this car, 1 spare tire, 2 flat tires, and all I did was, it was because I was so close to home, I just drove it at about 1 mile an hour back home, parked it in the driveway, but that pothole did that much damage because it was just my own fault. I wasn't paying enough attention. It was in kind of an odd area. So how do you prevent a flat tire? Try to get to the point where you're always scanning down the roadway, looking for potholes and breaks in the pavement. And our mind's pretty amazing. It actually kind of remembers what you saw more than you think you do, because you might look down the roadway and you're kind of really focusing way down the road, and next thing you know, when you come up to that pothole, you just sort of drive around it and you don't even think of it. If you're staring right in front of the car looking for potholes, they come up so quick you don't have time to react to them.
Yeah.
So doing that, also being a little bit cautious sometimes when you get in the car. It has happened to me a couple of times. The town I live in, like most towns, recycle. And every once in a while, something will fall out of the recycling bin, a bottle or something, and it'll roll into my driveway. And it gets stuck where? Right behind my rear tire. So if I go to back up, I'll drive over it. Will I get a flat tire? Maybe. So I always tell people, before you get in the car, just take a quick look around the car. Make sure there's nothing stuck under the tires. And you might even, my worst fear every time I see it is when someone's having a roof put on their house. And is there going to be roofing nails somewhere in the street? And today,
most likely.
Yeah, most likely, exactly. So if you're driving down the road and you hear kind of a tick, 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 tick sound coming from your tire, you may have picked up a nail. Have that tire looked at just in case. It's a lot easier to deal with it before the tire goes flat. So today's tires, they're actually very good, and you think about years back how often you had a flat tire, maybe in the last 5 years how often you had a flat tire. Tires are actually pretty resilient, but still it was not unusual, 30 years ago. It seemed like everybody's changed a flat tire a couple times in their life. You talk to people now that have never changed a flat tire because the tires are pretty good. But the one problem we're seeing now is tires have gotten so good and companies are working so hard to try to maximize fuel economy. They look at the spare tire and go, that weighs 50 or 60 pounds. Let's take it out.
Yeah.
And you don't really need a spare tire. Yes, you do. You need a spare tire in case of emergencies. But so they'll put sometimes a little air compressor in a jar of goo, and it actually is supposed to seal up the hole in the tire. That only works if the tire wasn't damaged.
Right.
If you hit a pothole or a curb and you damage the tire, the bottle of goo isn't going to do anything other than make a mess.
Yeah.
So we prefer that automakers keep spare tires in their cars.
Yeah.
It's easier for consumers, it's easier for tow operators. We don't want to tow cars. You don't want to have your car towed because you got a flat tire.
Right.
You want to have a spare tire put on and get you on your way and get you home and deal with it when you have time to deal with it. And so we're really trying to encourage vehicle manufacturers, keep the spares in cars. I haven't looked in a couple of years, but there was about 120 different makes and models of cars within the past 10 or 12 years that didn't have spare tires.
Oh,
in
wow.
them. Yeah, so I was on vacation last week and I rented a Kia Soul, that little boxy kind of station wagon thing, and it doesn't have a spare tire.
Wow.
And if you get a flat, yeah, you're a little bit in trouble. You're calling in this case, the dollar rent-a-car number and say, hey, I got a flat. Can you come out and swap the tire for me? So having a spare tire is important, but a little bit of tire maintenance, just checking the tires over periodically, making sure there's no punctures, making sure they're properly inflated, that can go a long way to make sure that your tires last a good long time.
I have a friend he moved to California, and we're used to driving in anything around here, So just to go up a little hill, a police officer pulled him over and said he couldn't go up this little hill without chains on his tires.
Oh, okay, yeah. There are those places out in California, out in Utah and Arizona, that you have to have winter tires or you have to have chains depending on where you are. Sometimes the tires have to have a true winter tire has actually a snowflake and a mountain designation on it. It has a little picture of a mountain with a snowflake. And that means it's a true winter tire. But yeah, there are places that you can only drive if you have chains, and I don't think I've seen a car with chains on it since I was a teenager. So
I know.
yeah,
I
but
know.
the snow can get pretty intense in places, and you need to be prepared.
So switching gears a little bit, see what I did there?
I saw that. Yeah.
What about engine oil? Supposedly you're supposed to change it every 3,000 miles. Is that accurate?
No. In fact, if you talk to people from Europe and you said to them, "Oh, I change my oil every 3,000 miles," they'd say, well, "Why are you doing that? You don't need to." It's something that we kind of cultivated here in the United States for a long time. The recommendation is really change the oil what the vehicle manufacturer recommends. Okay. So in most cases, it's somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 miles.
Oh, okay.
But it's important to use the proper oil in the car. So whatever that manufacturer calls for, if they call for semi-synthetic oil, synthetic oil, conventional oil, if it's 5W20, if it's 10W30, if it's 10W40, whatever the case is, you need to follow what the vehicle manufacturer recommends. There are these tiny little passageways in engines today that need to get oil through them, and if the oil is just thicker and gooier, it's not going to get where it needs to go, and you can actually have some problems. Years ago, there was an issue with some Chrysler company vehicles that people were putting the wrong grade of oil in, so instead of putting 5W20, they were putting 10W30, and it would actually cause the engine to run rough every once in a while, because it would actually cause the check engine light to come on and say the engine was misfiring slightly, and they'd be like, why? And you change the oil a couple times, put the right oil back in, and the engine would run right again. So it's important to use the right kind of oil and change it as the manufacturer recommends. Doing it every 3,000 miles, I guess it's the equivalent of brushing your teeth 6 times a day. It can't hurt,
Right.
But on the other hand, it's money you don't need to spend.
Yeah, I usually definitely wait till around 5.
Yeah. But again, you look at the vehicle owner's manual. My own car has 2 schedules. It's sort of a severe schedule and a normal schedule. The car dealership actually set up the reminder to come up at the severe schedule time, so change your oil every 3,750 miles. Well, severe schedule means you're driving in weather that's, below 32 degrees all the time. It's above 100 degrees all the time. You're driving at high speed. You're towing a trailer. I'm not doing any of those things. So I can go 7,000 miles between oil changes and not worry about it. But that's not an excuse not to open the hood once in a while and check the engine oil. As good as engines are today, it's still important to check the oil. And even a good engine can use a quart of oil in 1,000 or 1,500 miles. So if you're going 5,000 miles between oil changes and your car uses a quart of oil every 1,000 miles, by the time you come to 5,000 miles, there's almost no oil left in the engine. So it's still important to, every 1,000, 2,000 miles, open the hood. If your car has a dipstick, take the dipstick out, check the oil, put it back in. If it doesn't, it's checked electronically, but you want to make sure the oil level is full.
Yeah, I had that experience recently. My truck didn't go through oil very quickly, but then it suddenly started burning a little more than usual, and it was pretty empty.
Yeah,
it was close.
And what happens is every time it runs low on oil like that, you're doing a little extra wear and tear.
Right.
So even though you fill it back up and put oil back in it, you may have accelerated the oil usage a little bit because it did run low. But it's still a whole lot cheaper to maintain the oil in your car than it is to do whatever those necessary repairs are. You may find, to get the engine. I was talking to somebody or emailing with someone just the other day that had a 8 or 9 year old Audi, and the 2-liter engine in an Audi tends to burn oil. It did it right from the factory, and there was a class action suit, and a whole bunch of things happened, and but they were past the time of the class action suit, and they said the dealer said there's a $1,000 repair they can try that has about a 50% success rate, or the real repair is we need to rebuild the engine at $7,000 or $8,000. And I said, well, how much oil is it using? They said, well, it uses about a quart of oil in 800 miles. I said, well, for even $1,000, you can buy 300 quarts of oil, which will take you about 200,000 miles. I think I just add oil.
Right.
And the person kind of said, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I'm not going to keep the car 200,000 miles. So yeah.
So we talked about different oils. What about premium gas? Does that help the vehicle to run any better?
Different than premium oil. So I like to think of synthetic oil as premium oil. Synthetic oil has better lubrication abilities. The molecules in synthetic oil are all exactly the same. So it tends to flow better and lubricate better and maybe even run just a little bit cooler and provide additional lubrication and starting benefits. Cars with synthetic oil tend to start better in cold weather and things like that. Premium gasoline, on the other hand, if your car doesn't need it, it's a waste of money. I always thought gas was gas, it was all the same.
Yeah.
If I went to any gas station, I shop price more than anything else. But there is something called top tier gasoline. Most of the major manufacturers have top tier gasoline, and it's across all grades, so it's regular, mid-grade, premium. It has an extra fuel additive in it that helps keep the engine clean. We did some testing, laboratory testing, that showed that top tier gasoline will keep the combustion chamber cleaner in the car, and that's where the spark plug fires the fuel, and if it gets carbon and dirty inside there, it will keep the valves from closing properly, and it just causes problems. And top tier gasoline is, I always thought it was an advertising gimmick, nothing more than that. But our testing showed that it does offer some fuel cleaning, and it is better. But if your car doesn't require premium gasoline and you put premium in, you just spent 20 or 30 cents more per gallon than you needed to.
Yeah.
It isn't going to make the car run any better. In fact, some of our testing has shown that putting premium gasoline in a car that doesn't need it can actually cause some carbon issues as well, because the engine wasn't designed to burn that type of gasoline. So use whatever the vehicle manufacturer recommends. The other thing is there's kind of almost 3 ways to put it. You open up the little gas door and it says use 87 octane gas. Use that, regular gas. You might open up the gas door and it says 89 octane recommended. Not saying required, they're just saying recommended.
Recommended, yeah.
Recommended means you can use it if you want, not if you want. What you'll find is, if you don't use it, you may lose just a little bit of engine power. And consequently, you might lose a little bit of fuel economy. But our testing has shown that, and we tested on a dynamometer, so sort of a treadmill for vehicles. So we were exactly the same in every test. And what we found out was that what slight reduction there may have been in fuel economy didn't offset the extra cost that you pay for premium fuel.
Yeah.
So even though your car says use 89 octane or use 91 octane, and good luck trying to find that, because I swear they make up a number that doesn't exist on any gas pump sometimes. And you say, well, okay, there's no 91, I guess I'll use the 93, and that's, you know, $3 a gallon versus $2.65 for the regular. And you're paying 35 cents more a gallon, you're getting a smidge less gas mileage. It does, the numbers don't work.
Right.
So it makes sense at that point to just use 87. Different, so you know, you drive a Corvette or a Porsche or something like that, and you open up the gas door and it says premium required.
Right.
Then you have to use it.
Yeah.
Then you have to use it. And if you don't, it could cause some catastrophic engine damage. And even, it's not even just the ultra high performance cars, it can be maybe a sort of a Subaru Impreza STI, the kind of hot rod version of the little Subaru, that requires premium fuel. So you have to use it, and if you don't use it and something bad happens to the engine, they can actually look at how the engine performed and say, well, you weren't using the right gasoline, we're not going to stand behind the warranty. So sort of 3 steps. Use 87 if it says use 87. If it says use higher octane and it's recommended, do whatever you want. If it says premium required, use the premium, you have to do it.
So we're winding down here. We have about a minute and a half, but the question I'm really curious about is, because I've heard both sides of this question, do you need to warm up your car?
No. No. In fact, warming up your car really doesn't do anything for your car. It does something for you. Your car's nice and warm, but other than that, it doesn't do anything for your car. In fact, what we really recommend to people is get in your car, as long as the windshield's not frozen and things like that. Get in your car, start it up. By the time you find your favorite radio station, put your seatbelt on, you get comfortable, that's about all you need to warm up your car. Drive it nice and easy for the first few miles. Like the day you took it away from the showroom of the car dealership and you drove it nice and easy, that's how you should drive it every time you start it up when it's cold. That way everything warms up together. Just letting the car sit in your driveway for a half an hour running hasn't warmed up the transmission, it hasn't warmed up the brakes, it hasn't warmed up the suspension. All those things are still suffering from 5-degree temperatures. So nice and easy for the first, until you start to feel some heat come out of the vents.
Yeah.
When you start to feel heat coming out of the vents, drive it however you want.
Yeah.
But until that happens, nice and easy.
That makes sense. We have time for one more quick question.
Okay.
How do you feel about gas line antifreeze? Is that something that we should be doing?
Keep your gas tank at least half full in the wintertime. There's no room for condensation. There's little room for condensation to build up. Back in the old days, using gas line antifreeze, gas tanks weren't as tight in the gas stations or the car itself. If you want to put a bottle in once a season, that's all you need. You don't need to do it every fill up. It's a waste of money.
All right. John Paul,
All
thank
right.
you so
Sure
much
thing.
for coming in.
Thanks
This
for
has
having me
been
here.
informative and educational, and thank you for tuning in.